Welcome to day 16 of our 30 days of PM challenge. Today we are back again with another topic around product management and things a product manager typically does in their job. So today we are looking at ideation and how ideation is a critical part of your product and design thinking when coming up with solutions and approaches to build a specific solution, right, to a problem. I think in our previous stream on day 15, we looked at how do you frame and write a problem statement to begin with. And here, the next step after defining and after understanding the problem statement is looking at options of how do you actually solve that problem through design, through the user interface, and through the best way and the best UX possible, and helping the user achieve their goal. So this stream is all about that. We'll talk about design thinking and also look at how ideation is a critical process and part of that. And but you can also look at design thinking, which was covered in day 7 of our 30 days of PM challenge, where I covered in detail about design thinking and what really is part of design thinking and where does ideation fit into this process, right? And we also mentioned how design thinking and product thinking can be combined together when building solutions. But a lot of the times, eventually, the solution will be used by your users, right? You will have end users who you have kept in mind and built the solution for. And design thinking and product thinking essentially makes you think about the user and keep the user at center of all your decisions that you make of designing a product and designing a solution for that user, right? So part of the design thinking process is to empathize with the user. We look at examples of how other large products have empathized and put it as a key part of empathizing with the user, their needs, their background, their reasoning behind a particular requirement or problem that they currently face, and how empathizing with the user is not just a term to that we just added for the reason of understanding about the user, but it becomes a key problem and key section for you to design and define the solution around, right? So I think we look at examples of how Google Maps designed its app for mobile users and bike riders specifically, right? And the type of research they went through and the type of features they wanted to be added eventually after talking with multiple customers, empathizing with their requirements, and understanding their situation, and and the background around why they are using the product at a specific time or specific situation while riding their bikes, right? So we'll look at all those examples. But to begin with, ideation or coming up with ideas to a particular problem is part of your product and design thinking approach. It comes as the third section. If you look at the image here on the left, you have the five sections which are part of the design thinking process. A lot of the times user also and experts in the industry also critique on design thinking by calling it more linear as a process over your typical cyclic processes that you have when it comes to agile and other frameworks. But design thinking, in a sense, you could call it not being a circular approach, but instead being an approach where uh, you don't really cycle through variations. It is more a linear approach where you have a start and finish, and once you reach the finish, you can obviously restart from the beginning and again do the user research. But a lot of the times, one of the cons with design thinking is it involves interacting with users, right? You create a focus group of a set of users who the targeted feature I mean who the feature is targeted towards, a specific set of customer personas that you're dealing with or building the solution for. You create a focus group with them, you go through a few mock-ups and few sessions with them, defining and extracting and collaborating on approaches of designing a particular section or field within the product and iterating on that, right? So a lot of times design thinking can introduce a lot of timeline delays. To get to the final understanding and evaluation or results from a design thinking and user focus group session approach. So it does increase the amount of time required to deliver, because design thinking needs focus groups and users to interact and work together in a session to figure out the enhancements required. So this is about design thinking here, and we are looking at the ideation side of things, right? So once we have empathized with the user, understood their context and background, you start defining and ideating approaches. So defining is where your problem statement approach comes into play, where you try to provide as much details as possible on the requirements that are at hand. Not really the requirements, but the problem statement that you're dealing with, right? Or the scenario that you're trying to solve for, and trying to provide a crisp statement to help and align all your stakeholders together. But after defining this, you look at options of how do you actually solve this problem, right? And there are multiple approaches you can go by, and multiple frameworks that you can look at when ideating. You can always put yourself in the shoes of the customer. Think, if you were actually a user, how would you go about solving for this, right? If you were to solve it in X way, is there a better way to, for example, solve the same approach? Or if there can be an enhancement to an existing framework or an existing section of the platform that can solve the problem, and you are good with that. So a lot of the times you might come up with multiple options and multiple ways of solving a problem, and then after that you can probably have frameworks where, I think also in the article here they've mentioned about this approach called how might we, right? So anytime you have a problem, you have multiple solutions and multiple ways of approaching the problem and solving for it. Think of, take one of your examples and potential solutions. Think of how might we improve this, right? How might I think we've given an example of catering. So we are trying to hire a catering, but we feel like the amount of services that we are offered and the price we pay for it is not really at the same level and how we would like it to be priced. So then you ask yourself the question, how might we improve the uh, catering for an event, but not necessarily spend a lot of time? So do we really, so how could we do that? We probably might have to look at other options. We might have to look at other ways of catering. Are there other in-house options, or are there somewhere where I can hire a catering staff on a discount through a platform that is still discovering and is new in the market? So there might be multiple ways of, for example, just solving for a particular problem. So just spin around the problem on how might we solve this, right? And rephrase it, come up with iterations, and you will automatically start thinking as a user of how I feel like the problem should be solved for. And it's not necessary that the first approach is the right approach. You might even come up with multiple options even during rephrasing of this problem statement in how might we, because there are ways to solve it in multiple ways, right? And then you, balance and play, look at odds, and what really is the user looking for, right? Also consult with the user if possible. You can tell them that we have two approaches, both of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. List them out, see what the user likes, and provide them the one they expect, right? And if you feel like the second approach also can help another set of customers, take an element from that and try to see how you can fuse the two approaches together, right? And build a robust solution. So these are a few ways of thinking about and ideating towards solutions. And ideation in general requires working with users, right? It can involve other PMs also within your team and other stakeholders within your team, brainstorming and interacting with them to come up with a right solution. So this is all about ideation and how you can come together as a team, empathize with the user, look at the options available, think of potential options, look at how can they be improved? If there is a way for you to consolidate all of these solutions into a one single solution, by not really expanding the scope of things, but having an approach where things can be taken care of, and where you have the ability to solve for that problem and solve and come up with an idea and solve, create the ideation process to be available. uh, so yeah, these are a few things related to ideation. Let's look at a few examples of uh, a few details on the pros and cons of design thinking, how you can actually leverage and when to leverage it. Because in a newer project, if you have tight deadlines to meet, you probably will not have a lot of time to think of designs. You might not even have times to build high fidelity mockup. So a lot of the times it's just talking to engineering and deciding what's the easiest way that they can build, and if they can build it in an approach that you feel like is better, but the bandwidth and the timelines don't really allow for a specific enhancement or the way or a specific approach to be implemented, we look at the best option we have at the time, right? So there might be various constraints when looking at design thinking and the approaches for that, right? So I think we this article in a sense talks very well about design thinking and the processes that are involved. So here, these are the five phases like we talked about. We empathize, define approaches, ideate with customers, ideate through focus groups, ideate individually and with other stakeholders, build prototypes. Through prototypes you might also come up with other ways of solving a specific problem, and you go back to the ideation loop. Here you test these changes after delivering them, and once these are tested you can define them back based on the feedback received and improve and iterate on the approach. So you can pick and choose and cycle through different steps, but when you consider it as a whole process of these five steps, it's a lot more linear as a five-step framework, but a lot flexible when it comes to switching from one approach one step to the other, and us juggling between these, right, and getting feedback and improving and iterating onto that. So this is about design thinking, and I think they also talk about empathy. Let's look at this example from Google Design, where they talk about how they went about looking at designing, for example, the Google Maps application for motorbikes, right? So the first thing is the two-wheeler mode shows which routes are accessible to motorbikes. This feature includes shortcuts for faster arrival times, because a lot of the times their hands are tied to the vehicle, right? And they don't really have a lot of time and wheel room to click and interact with a lot of sections. And if you have a crowded UX, it becomes even harder for the user, right, to navigate and get value out of the map GPS application here. So the first step they did was talk to two-wheeler owners, right, within a based on and from a very unique set of user bases and user personas to begin with. They engaged with them, talked to them, talk about their experience. They looked at how do they actually use their mobile phone while also commuting. Some put it use a phone holder to attach it to their dashboard. Some have these suction devices that can help stick the product or the mobile phone to the handle of the uh, vehicle, and they can then interact with it, right? So there might also be constraints on how the device is positioned, whether it is in landscape and portrait mode, and how do you design your application around both these orientation modes, right? So as a PM, and this is also a thing you have to do while you are thinking of designs, right? Do you just replicate the same design, or because you'll have to rearrange a few buttons and a few sections here and there? Some might take a lot of space when vertical, and others might take when they are horizontal. So these are things that you think about when doing these design thinking session with these focus groups and user personas, right? You then team up with locals and team up with communities with different backgrounds, and here they're talking to a Gojek driver who is delivering, and talking to the product managers on the type of design and timelines of things that they typically interact with when delivering goods on their motorbike, right? So after all these decisions, they share the insights through storytelling and not just data, right? It always is helpful when you have a story and a strong reason to back your claim, and storytelling helps in that, right? Just having numbers on a deck doesn't really do the job, but understanding why the numbers are the figures they are, and tying it to a story, and through all of these data points that you have, weaving a story talking about the insights that you have gained through the user research, and then taking decisions on improving and iterating the product. So yeah, and these are other videos and details about how they went about the process, and they've also given advice on how why you should actually define a process early on, and how defining these design principles early helps with the product vision and direction, right? So you might have some constraints that you always want to achieve, and which becomes a part of the decision making process of what needs to be added and what needs to be subtracted, right? So, and the design principle helped us work out specific details. For example, Google writer here referred to the guide when choosing a name for that mode, right? To relate more closely to the local dialect, two wheeler was chosen audience and motor for Indonesia. So a lot of insights from what do they actually call, how do they behave, what do they use when they talk about motor vehicles, and do they really call it a two wheeler or do they call it a motor vehicle, right? Even minute details on that, empathizing with, because all users for a specific geography and for diverse come from diverse backgrounds might interpret things differently, right? Things uh, we in the Indian region call two wheelers, motor vehicles as two wheelers, whereas in Indonesia they call it motor vehicles or motorbikes, for example. So, basis the region, we have to also keep into mind what to actually portray or provide as part of the description to the particular product. And then empathy, as we talked, is not just a concept; it's a practice in to share throughout the process. Always have empathy towards the user and the reason, and understand the background as to why they use and why you need to do a specific section of for in a certain way for a certain set of audience, right? Like we looked at the naming convention being changed just based on the region for motorbike I mean motor you I mean two wheeler users, right? So these are a few examples of how design thinking actually impacts what gets built and how it gets built, right? And then you go and scale from there. So this is how a design thinking process looks like in a large corporation like Google. A lot of the times, as we already talked, the con is it requires a lot of time to do the research, but eventually it's worth it. So if you have the time, always prefer talking to focus groups, talking to your users, having these sessions, understanding how they pronounce and how they interact and behave for with respect to a certain action, and an action that they perform on a daily basis, either through your product or as part of their daily lives. So understand that, take that into consideration, have the problem statement ahead of you, look at options, and then iterate and build and improve the product for these users. I think the other example we have is example of threads in Slack and how they went about looking at threads. So threads was a concept also available in Twitter. So they looked at options of how Twitter did things when it came to threads. So they looked at the Twitter model for inlining, but it didn't really work. They looked at other options of having an overlay when you click, for example, a message that has a thread attached to it, but it didn't really solve the purpose, and limited the amount of messages you could see, uh, and introduced more problem than actually solving. And the third approach was to have like a right sidebar when for example, a message has a thread. So these were approaches, for example, the Slack team went through when building threads within Slack, right? And similarly, when it came to Spotify, they were trying how the login page experience moved from just having a static page with like a header and a message with the ability to download or open the Spotify app, uh, to actually being the homepage where users can start listening from the get-go, listening to the music, right? So for this, Spotify did user surveys as to what do they actually use Spotify for, right? So a lot of responses came back just to listen to music. That's the key action they want to perform when logging into Twitter. So to do that, what Twitter essentially decided is, when you go earlier, they just had an open button, redirection to sign up, to log in, and then be able to listen to music, right? So instead, the steps would they essentially transitioned and changed the steps, where when you click on spotify.com, the earlier spotify.com layout was, you get an entry point, you authenticate, we then administrator, and then you get to look at the content. So how can we improve this interface, right? We can probably play around and design things in a way where the the moment to value is quicker, right? uh, and essentially eliminate the friction points for the user to get to the music and the content they actually came to Spotify for, based on the reviews and the surveys that we did. What they eventually ended up building, having is a new site architecture, where instead of having multiple steps to then eventually getting to the content, you just show the content when you just land onto the page, and if you want to start listening, then you bring out the authentication section and even streamline and make that simpler for users. So eventually what ended up happening was, when you log into now, just Google and search for spotify.com, you get to the web player of the Spotify experience. You can see your music there, you can see the playlist and see your favorite artist already listed and available to you. And then you once you click on any of these playlist and music videos, you can easily sign up. Even that process has been made seamless, and so that you can start listening to your music, which was the core insight from the survey that was got, right? So instead of having like it's essentially making use of the real estate you have the website, you had the messaging and the content marketing with the I mean your statement and purpose put up. Instead of doing a lot of messaging and marketing and branding activities, you provide the user what they actually came to spotify.com for, is to listen music. We have your music, you can look at the music, you look at all the details related to, you can play music even through your web browser, through the new architecture, and play and sing music across your devices. But the time to value is quicker. You don't really have to log in, you don't really have to go through all the steps of signing in, signing up. You have your music right there in front of you, and to listen to music, just have to sign in by one additional step. So it builds confidence for the user. They already have they don't really feel like it's a lot of investment they have to make to get started with Spotify, because things are already available and you can see and interact with them live when you are looking at the website, right? So these are iterations and improvements that you can make to your product through the design thinking process, by talking to user groups, conducting surveys, having review sessions with them, and building the solution eventually, right? So a lot of the defining of the requirements comes from these sessions of design and product thinking, and building the right solution for your customers, which eventually is a win for both you as a business owner and as a product manager, providing value to the business, and also for the user, where they get what they want in the quickest way possible, and helping them solve a task that they were looking to solve through your product, and you're getting the revenue generated, or the share of revenue of a new customer being onboarded to your platform. So this is how design thinking works. You go through approaches, you empathize with the customer, what are their actual needs, define and come up with options and solutions, potential solutions. You ideate on them, you prototype them, you test them, you repeat through the cycle, and go through the steps again and again, and improve your product to provide the most amount of value to your customers. So this is how design thinking works. If you want to look at more such interesting way where design thinking has been applied, you can go through This blog post from Manas, where he has collected multiple resources. I think also in our day 7 live stream of design thinking in specifically, we talked about how Swiggy Pop came into being, right? And how they iterated, prototyped and tested the feature, and how it came into being, and how it helped the business grow for the time period it was available as a feature within the product. So yeah, this has been about design thinking and how you can use that to make decisions, and the frameworks that you can use from just having an idea to looking at the best way of solving for that idea, right? A lot of the times ideas and user requirements, when they are written, are written in a way where they first talk about a person, they talk about why the person needs something and the reason they need it for, right? And the reason causing them and the potential improvements or uh, i mean value that a specific need, if solved, can bring to that user. So even when you write user stories, you have this layout and format of, as a user, who is the user and the persona, I need X, I need some functionality, the reasoning behind it, I need a functionality or a specific action that I need to perform so that I can do Z, which is the reason why you want that, or the reasoning behind, or the insight behind actually wanting, behind your need, and what you want the product to deliver. So this is a point of view framework, you can also call it that, and it essentially is part of your story writing process when you write stories. And a lot of stories do begin with this statement, right? As a engineer, I need the ability to look at documentation and APIs in order to build automation for my personal use. So this is a simple statement I came up with for a specific persona, for a specific need, to act on a specific insight, based on a specific insight and reasoning behind that need. So and then I can look at options through the how might we rephrasing of the problem statement itself, and then look at options, do the design, go through the design thinking process, talk to customers, have user sessions, iterate, improve, and deliver your product to them. So this has been about design thinking and how you can use a design thinking and the processes that are part of design thinking, which are empathizing with the user, I defining potential approaches to solve for the problem that the human is and the user is facing, ideating options, prototyping these options, and testing these options live with the customer, and iterating and improving on these from there. So yeah, this has been about ideation and how you can turn your ideas into reality through the process of design thinking. We'll meet tomorrow on another topic and another session of 30 days of PM, learning about product management and things that a real product manager actually does as part of their job, and share insights through this live stream and our YouTube and Twitter channels. So yeah, stay tuned. We'll see you tomorrow on another session about product management. Thank you.